You can't beat them, then you pop them. You can't man them, then you mop them. You can't stand them, then you drop them. You pop them, cause we pop them like over red and vodka. Young money, C3, okay, a millionaire. I'm a young money millionaire.
Good morning and welcome to the Daily Stack. Today we have Norma Chu, CEO of DDC. Norma, thanks for joining us. Also, Brian Rothenberg. He's been on Treasury Talks. He's been our guest host, but has almost become just the co-host that's always been there, bringing the knowledge, bringing the passion, which I truly appreciate. But to our esteemed guest, Norma, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me here, Jody. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, we're excited. We've been talking with Yujia. We've met him at a few conferences down in Hong Kong, and that was always a connection we wanted to make, was bringing you on. And then Brian has met you at the New York, Digital
Conference last September. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, so we're excited to kick off today. There's a few things on the news side, we'll dive into. I think there's a pretty interesting $40 million crypto theft by a federal officer's son. But first, Norma, would love to hear, before we get into your background, 2026, it's January. People are trying to figure out, how do we approach Bitcoin Treasury companies this year? How do we approach, the Bitcoin standard for putting, pristine collateral on your balance sheet? I think we've seen all over the place, the Treasury companies, like a Nakamoto or someone get beaten up on the stock market. So we'd love to see your mindset going into 2026. How are we approaching this? How are we going to be on offense and start a fresh new year?
Yeah, I mean, when we think about looking ahead into 2026, we first start with reflecting on 2025, counting what we've done right, what we've learned in this really exciting journey of just, 7 to 8 months since we launched the Bitcoin Treasury strategy in May. And we're really excited about what we have ahead in the next few months. If you look at what we have announced in the past couple of weeks, we've already made 2 new purchases, adding 400 Bitcoin to our stack. Right now, we have about 1,583 Bitcoin on the balance sheets, and we're prepared to buy more. So I think one thing going into 2026 that we'll consistently continue to do since we started this journey is just to be consistent and to be disciplined and to continue to take advantage of the recent pullback in Bitcoin pricing so we can continue to accumulate Bitcoin at these lower levels.
I think that's great. And I think one of the other things, compared to a lot of the other treasury companies that we think about and some of the interviews that we've done with other CEOs, they're kind of focused a lot on the sort of balance sheet side of things, right? Putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet and focusing those pieces. But at DDC, you have a very strong operating business that you had before, and you're kind of combining the two things. There are a few companies that are just sort of, well, we have some operations, and when we have some extra money, we'll put some Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But you're kind of doing a blend of both. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you think about those things and sort of the blended approach and why that's potentially beneficial, right? Both for you as a company leader, but also for your shareholders in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are multiple ways to adopt a Bitcoin Treasury strategy. That there, of course, you have the pure play where Bitcoin is the business. There is the second archetype, which is business first, and then when there's retained earnings, we can slowly acquire Bitcoin onto the balance sheets. But I think sometimes that with the second approach, when you have a thinner margin business, for example, our business, which is food, we have relatively thinner margins. That takes a long time to allow the business to really grow your stack to a more sizable scale that for it to really matters or strengthen the resilience of your business. So we consciously took the third approach, which is really a hybrid approach. We believe building a growing operating business is important because it can continue to generate free cash flow. And with that cash flow, it can continue to fund the operating business's growth. At the same time, it can also add to the Bitcoin stack. But at the same time, we also have been fairly active, especially last year when the market was running up, where we've done a couple of round of dedicated financing just to be more aggressive in terms of adding Bitcoin to our balance sheets. So when I think about DDC, I think it's really a dual engine approach where, one engine is cash generating food platform and the other one is our long-term Bitcoin reserves. So the operating engine is already self-sustaining and it generates free cash flow, which means it funds the growth like product launches, marketing, expansion, without needing to tap into the Bitcoin side. And I think because that first engine runs on its own power, the second engine now, the Treasury, can really focus on purely accumulation. Surplus cash and dedicated capital can really, flow into Bitcoin without slowing down what we're building in food. So I don't really think these are competing priorities within DDC. I think one engine is dedicated to creating value in the real world, and the other basically is storing that value in the hardest money we know. So I think together they let us really grow a more modern consumer brand business and also at the same time a very serious Bitcoin treasury.
Sorry, Jody, I think you're muted.
I should know better than this. This is our own show. On that point, I want to actually like signpost that for a lot of people that are new to the treasury space that are listeners. What we saw last year was a huge focus on Bitcoin per share, the metrics around leverage, and then growing as fast as possible with capital raises, just for any Bitcoin treasury company. I think, we lost sight a little bit of operational business. Cash flow is king, and it almost seemed like a drag or a deterrent having having that operating business on the side that wasn't purely focused on just injecting capital and buying Bitcoin. Now that the market sentiment has changed and the market is so driven by sentiment, our friend, you probably know, Adrian Morris, is very big on preaching sentiment is the number one factor in markets and how they're driven. You guys with the operating business, cash flows are stable, they're coming in, and that should set you apart, versus anyone that just raised capital purely to be a leveraged Bitcoin play. Did it feel validating when you saw strategy even start building that cash reserve to make Wall Street feel better about their ability to pay the preferred dividends over time?
That's for me, right? No,
Yeah.
I think definitely when we first thought about, or when I first thought about adopting this strategy, how do we differentiate ourselves amongst the peer group? The first thing really comes to mind is to stay focused and not to lose sight of what we're building with the underlying business. And I think that's different from me as a founder and the CEO versus other CEOs in the other DATs or Bitcoin Treasury company, because I built this business, or I've been building this business for 13, 14 years, going on 14 years now. And any decision I make, I really look at it from not just like, am I going to hit this number in the next quarter? Or am I going to deliver result in the next quarter? But it's like, okay, if I make this strategic proposal to the board, is it going to be beneficial to us and the shareholder for the next 5 years, 10 years, and the decades ahead? And so I think not losing sight in terms of what we're building underneath the Bitcoin Treasury, which at sometimes in the market is really exciting, and everybody just focuses on the Treasury side. It's really important for us to remember that what we're doing here is adding something extraordinary to a growing underlying business, and that has to be value added, because adding Bitcoin doesn't fix everything, right? To a company, it doesn't fix bad economics, it doesn't fix bad execution or bad strategy. So I think the underlying fundamental of the business have to make sense, and then with a healthy business, then you add Bitcoin to it, then the magic really comes through. So I think that's how we look at it, and that's how we want to continue to grow the underlying business and our stack as well.
I think that's really helpful context there, and I'm curious. I think with your origin story, I think one of your investors or maybe even one of your board members was talking to you about Bitcoin and maybe got you started a little bit. But I'm curious, over the last year, as you've kind of, I don't want to say pivoted your strategy, because it's not like you've done a 180 and are going in a completely different direction, and you're kind of, doing both alongside each other. But what have you heard from your shareholders? Like, how are they viewing this strategy over the long term and your plans there? Because you probably have shareholders who've been with you for a long time in that journey for the last, 14 years. And same thing with your board members, right? Some of them are probably not necessarily Bitcoiners. So for anybody who's kind of considering this for, private businesses, for public companies, not everybody's going to be familiar with these pieces because they're probably not all listening to the Daily Stack. So I'm curious how that's been and sort of what the feedback has been over the last, 7 to 8 months, especially as we've seen sort of Bitcoin price go down and some of the sentiment turn a little bit negative overall. But, for us, and we're kind of preaching to the choir maybe a little bit here, but, the three of us have strong belief in the fundamentals of Bitcoin in the long run, right? So the short run doesn't matter. But curious to hear those perspectives from your stakeholders.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, our board members, independent board members, we have three of them. Two of them are really consumer industry veteran. One board member actually have some experience in Bitcoin because he's the CFO of another Bitcoin mining company and gaming company. But first of all, I think when I first started thinking about adopting the strategy and how I presented the board, how I win their trust and support to launch this, it's really about education and sharing and be open-minded. And I'm really grateful that my board has been super supportive. I mean, they've been with DDC for a few years prior to our IPO. And so they know my style. Like, I'm not going to come to them unprepared or present ideas that I don't truly believe in. So I think it was just really important for any CEOs that want to adopt a strategy to, first of all, have your own conviction, right? Be educated and also be willing to share your vision in terms of how adding this strategy to your business will help the underlying business as well, not just adding to the balance sheet strength. And after that, from a shareholder standpoint, if you look at our performance last year, we really I've seen DDC gone up a few times into all-time highs in the middle of last year around July. Of course, it pulled back a bit along with Bitcoin pricing. But what it's shown us, I think, is existing investors continue to believe in DDC because some of them also participated in our new round of financing when we announced the Bitcoin strategy, a treasury strategy, which was super exciting because long-term investors believed us when we're building the food business. Now we add the Bitcoin treasury strategy to it. They are doubling down and continue to invest with us. But at the same time, you look at retail investors coming into DDC, I think we're also able to attract and appeal to a new group of investors that are more Bitcoin native. And I think those investors also see the differentiation of DDC versus other treasury companies out there. Not only are we raising capital to buy Bitcoin, we also have a profitable underlying business to kind of fuel that growth. So I think we've been very fortunate that we have existing investor support, but also attracting new investors coming into the cap table.
Speaking of new investors, or even new consumers, so you guys have really doubled down on focusing on Asia right now and your operations there. Tell us a little bit about that market, how it differentiates, the growth prospects. We've seen from a company perspective, or geopolitical perspective, export controls on silver, and that's part of the debasement trade. So we believe there's potential for other companies in Asia specifically to recognize hard balance sheet assets like Bitcoin. And especially as you look at like export controls and, the printing of money worldwide, Japan is something we talk about regularly. So tell us about just that market, how you approach it, and the possibility of other companies similar to DDC adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, we refocused our business into Asia and China market last year when we exited the US operations. And we announced that strategic decision in the first half results. And sometimes when people hear the Asia pivot, they sometimes think, a big geopolitical story. But in reality, we really went to refocus our business to where the margins and consumers and demands are. I mean, we had a growing US business and it was really exciting. We were buying, really cool, fun, popular Asian food brands here in the US, which gave us nice revenue growth, but the margin profile was just not there, especially with some uncertainties around, tariffs. structurally it
Sure.
was loss making and it soaked up a lot of management attention. But then if we look into Asia, back into especially China market where DDC started and our brands are native, our supply chains are tighter, and the unit economics just makes more sense. So when we exited the loss making US business, even though revenue dropped 9% in the first half, when you look at the margin structure, profitability, it told a very different story, right? Our gross margin improved, operating expenses dropped significantly, and our gross margin hit a record 33.4%. And we delivered, first profit as a public company. So I think sometimes when we, as the CEO, we have to make these, tough decisions. Something shiny, growing, really exciting, but at the same time, we have to look at what's really important right now in the next phase of the journey. And I think for Bitcoin Treasury, once again, the operating business should be sound, should be sustainable, and it should not be loss making. So that was a tough call on that I had to make in the beginning of last year. I think that's really the big difference between sometimes chasing, revenue vanity. We want to grow the top line, grow scale, but it's important to also achieve this sanity with margin and with, profitability. So yeah, the whole decision of us exiting the U.S. market, refocusing on mainland China, is really just margin driven. Yeah, I think we just want to focus on where we want to be excellent where our brands and economics are the strongest, and then build our Bitcoin treasury on top of that strength.
Yeah, that's really, I guess, refreshing to hear. I remember reading a book about investing a couple of years ago called The Outsiders, and just CEOs in the 80s who were doing the opposite of what a lot of the other CEOs were, right? They were, buying back their stock when it was super cheap. They weren't trying to invest in everything. They were looking at the margins in their business rather than trying to grow the biggest, baddest thing on the block, right? And so
Yeah.
at the end of the day, really delivering for your shareholders. And then also, what a lot of people say, if we're investing in Bitcoin is our hurdle rate as well, right? So if you have a loss making business in the US market, that is a tough decision, right? Do we try to fix something or whatever it is? But also just focus. And I applaud you for kind of thinking about it in that way, because a lot of people would like to think about, I want to be a bigger company, I want to grow on the list, all of those types of things in the end there. I guess, one thing that a couple of the companies out there have talked about, if they have operating businesses and other pieces, is kind of those elements and how it kind of can build more towards Bitcoin. So I'm curious on the operational side, if there's anything with sort of the legacy DDC business that you're looking at for this year that you want to share. Certainly, I'm sure that we have a lot of Bitcoiners on, and we'll get to the Bitcoin elements of things probably a little bit later. But on the operational side, because I'll say for myself, I don't look into your operational business all that much, right? It's sort of the Bitcoin side that interested me. But, there are benefits to this. And I think I'm starting to see much more of those benefits in the operating business than maybe I was looking for in July, for example. So I'd love to hear sort of the strategy and plan specifically on that side.
Sure. Well, we haven't announced our full year results yet for 2025, so I cannot be too specific. We've only announced the first half for last year. But, we did see continuous trend in the second half of 2025 of double-digit growth in the underlying operating business in Asian markets. In particular, we're very excited about the export business. We produce some of the products in mainland China, but we export it to some Southeast Asia countries. And we're going to continue to grow that business in a very disciplined, profit-focused manner going into 2026. Hopefully, we'll generate even more net profit this year that can add to the Bitcoin stack and also continue to grow the underlying business organically.
So as you look at really the focus side of it, and you mentioned management attention, many treasury companies are looking at preferred stocks, preferred equities. You have, all of strategies, flavors, Stretch, Strive, Stream, and you have, Strive launching SATA and raising capital in that way. With having a successful operating business that has cash flow, do you feel for you guys now focusing a lot on the preferred equity and marketing those and doing the road shows pulls you away from really building that cash flow business?
No, I think it's different teams managing different side of the business. I think the operating team basically is fairly streamlined because we've been doing that for a few years now, and they've been doing a great job. And if we think about the growing the Bitcoin business is really myself and several other senior management team spearheading a lot of different initiatives. But when we think about offering different kinds of preferred or different kinds of instrument, we are very open to it. And we are definitely been active in having different conversation with investors in terms of exploring more opportunities and partnerships in terms of how DDC can acquire more Bitcoin in the most capital efficient manner. So I won't say that we are not looking into it, but we should make some announcement. And I wrote it in my shareholder letter that I think I dropped a couple of weeks ago, that we are going to introduce a convertible preferred equity product this year.
Yeah.
But then is going to be private, so it's going to be privately held and then convert into our public equity, public instrument. So that is already in play, and we'll probably make more announcement on that soon.
I like that.
Yeah. I guess, one of the things that I always like to probe different Bitcoin Treasury CEOs on is sort of why you make some of the decisions you make there. And one of my questions was sort of, what do you disagree with other CEOs in terms of a perspective on, and not to call one out, but just sort of, there are different perspectives to have. And that's sort of wonderful thing about capital markets and capitalism itself. But, you kind of led me to this question, which is sort of why private, placement of the preferreds rather than public placement that we've seen from others, and sort of how you think about that. So that, I guess, could be a two-part question if you want. So why the private placement, but also, is there anything else that you see in the market that you just say, that's not for us, or certainly we would do this thing even though someone else wouldn't? Just love to kind of hear these perspectives, because I think as an investor, and I'm sure that there are other viewers who are, hearing different perspectives on these things help us create better mental frameworks to know which companies are going to succeed in the long run.
Well, when we designed and put together this product, which is the convertible preferred private instrument, we kind of discussed with our legal counsel as well, because the privately held preferred can be converted into public equities, into the common class A. So we thought that it really didn't need to be listed on its own, especially if the investor who's buying into this instrument doesn't need the product to be publicly traded. And I think that's kind of how we land to the current structure of this preferred share class, because right now we are probably going to be placing these preferred shares into a handful of investors and partners, and they don't need to trade it on a daily basis, and they're probably looking into potential upside in the DDC Class A shares down the road, at the same time earning a fairly stable yield on the preferred, or dividend on the preferred share class. So I think that's kind of how I would answer your first part of the question, Brian, is because the partners that are going to hold this instrument don't need them to be public. And if they want to have public or upside exposure, then they convert into the Class A shares. And then secondly, I think it's about scale. For us to, once again, coming back to Jody's point, for us to launch a roadshow and to target to do, let's say, $100 million, $200 million publicly traded preferred share class, I think it's going to be quite intensive in terms of garnering that kind of public interest into a new instrument, especially when DDC is still trying to grow the stack to a more sizable amount. I would think that as we continue to launch and stay focused in terms of buying more Bitcoin onto the balance sheets, exploring the use of the hybrid new instrument that we have that's going to be launched privately, we continue to re-rate the stock and the market cap gets bigger into, let's say, 250, 300 million plus, then we can then think about, okay, maybe we can allocate some time and bandwidth into exploring a publicly traded instrument, where we'll then look into potentially launching in the size of, let's call it $100 to $120 million.
Yeah. So as you're looking at, and I think you said, building a 100-year company, it looks like staging a lot of these phases out, like seeing investor interest with private investments first, making sure you have full allocation, and then moving to more of the public roadshow. Is that how you're trying to move at a very intentional path versus there's a lot of, we've seen a lot of treasury companies do a lot really quickly, and it doesn't always get the interest from the market and from institutional investors that they had hoped?
Yeah, and I won't say that I'm that smart to predict everything, but it was just like, oh, this product and idea
Yeah.
came about, and we went to a couple partners that we think that they might be interested in, and we want
Mhm.
to test the water and say, hey, the sentiment has changed in the public equities market for DATs and for Bitcoin treasury companies, but we want to continue to stack. And we do believe that as we continue to execute and be disciplined and be focused, the market will come back along, with Bitcoin pricing and along with us growing a bigger stack. Would you be interested in holding this instrument privately for, the next 12 months or 12,
Yeah.
18 months? And there's interest. And so we just continue to kind of, go down that path. And then one partner became three partners. And now we're five potential partners interested in working with DDC to grow out Bitcoin stack with an instrument like this. So we just continue to do it as such. One of my board members did ask me though, why don't we list this? Why don't we do a public offering? And then my point is, we have interest right now, and at the cost is actually a lot more competitive than launching it publicly, because the dividend rate on these privately held notes are actually lower from the rates that we're seeing in the public instruments. Then I think that is a more efficient way for us to do it. Maybe after we get to scale, maybe we place, let's call it 100 million plus of these convertible preferred shares, then we can explore maybe listing it together and doing it with a new offering as well.
Mhm.
But it was just like a natural progression. We just went to market with trusted partners and there's interest, and then we pursue further.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And hopefully my question was a bit of a leading one, because I think that the key word for you is scale, right? If we look at some of the other companies that have done listed preferreds, like, yeah, everybody wants to follow in the footsteps of Strategy, but Strategy is a much bigger and very different company than, DDC, even Metaplanet. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, especially where you've got those private placements and those relationships. And people underestimate sort of all of the work that goes into a public placement and the roadshow and all of those things as well, I think. So, Jody, looks like you have a slide for us to take a look at.
Yeah, I was gonna. I mean, that was perfect time to show a little visual on. You guys are still growing, starting off the year. New BTC purchase. So, like,
Yes,
thank you
thank
for
you.
that. Keeping the floor above 86, 87. There's part of this is that's all timing, right? Like you mentioned, I think in several ways that you guys are very intentional and that you're moving methodically through, seeing where interest is, making sure you're focused on the operating business. For someone that's moving very intentionally, there's not the lump sum. I have to buy immediately as much Bitcoin as possible, and whatever price that is, it could have been over 100,000 last year, but now you guys are actually in a better position. Your average price is 88,000. Bitcoin right now is, I can't even read that ticker, but I think 87 and change. So this actually has worked out pretty well timing wise, I think, for you guys to be able to stack some more Bitcoin under 90,000 to be able to
Absolutely.
grow.
Yeah.
That's got to be exciting. I know that let's make sure we can get Brian back on here, but what's the feeling like on that?
Well, I remember last year, once we complete a fundraise, we always get asked, when are you going to buy? When are you going to spend all that cash and turn to Bitcoin? And I think part of my judgment call in terms of when we make these purchases or how we make these purchases goes back to my previous life before DDC,
Yeah.
because I was an equity research analyst for almost 10 years, and you see market
Yeah.
comes and go, right? And then I would advise a lot of high net worth and individuals and clients in terms of how they average their positions into the stock that I would recommend them to build positions in. And so the way I approach DDC building position in Bitcoin is the same thing. I do hold a long-term conviction in this asset class, and so I will continue to buy during up and down cycle. But even though when it was going in extreme, the sentiment was very exciting. I remember in October it was going to 123,000. People were buying more Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, but probably not at this point and not all in at once. And so we kind of hold back and want to observe the market a little bit. And I think now it's kind of stabilized within this range. And then we start like accumulating again into the new year. Of course, we actually had a lot of pressure to make more purchases earlier, because we had a very aggressive, ambitious goal of buying 10,000 Bitcoin at the end of last year.
Yeah.
But I think these goals for me is like a North Star. And for management team and leadership, we have to be nimble and always keep a close eye and open mind in terms of what's happening in the market. I think if we rushed into acquiring a lot of Bitcoin at the end of last year, we would have gotten now is probably sitting on a relatively large unrealized net loss position on our P&L, which I think right now we are, probably luckily avoided. But our approach going forward is the same, right? We want to have the flexibility and we want to be prepared when the opportunity comes. So what we've done in the past 2 months is really talking to different partners, preparing ourselves to go into 2026 with a full war chest of ability to buy more Bitcoin, either with cash or with issuing new convertible preferred equities or just common class A. And so I think I'm really excited because we do have those partners lined up, and we're excited of more opportunities to acquire more Bitcoin at these levels.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin yield at 33%. There's not too many companies that have done that so far in 2026. So kudos to you. One thing that you mentioned there that you remind me of that I don't think I've ever heard you talk about is that I'm not aware, I'm sure there might be one out there, but another CEO who was an equity research analyst. So I'm curious, both as a Bitcoin Treasury CEO, but also just as a CEO of a publicly traded company, how that makes you think about some of the decision-making and sort of the sentiment in the stock price and everything else, because you kind of sat on the other side of the table in terms of looking at companies from that perspective. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that piece.
It's very interesting to kind of sit on the other side of the table and running a listed company after being a research analyst for so many years. And I mean, it's a huge journey. I mean, we've only been listed for 2 years now, 2 years and 2 months. We've learned a lot, and there's so much more to learn. But I think it helps. It helps in terms of for me being in the driver's seat, but also to zoom out and put things in broader, longer, and bigger perspective. And a lot of times, I think even though, give an example, early conversations I've had with investors back in Bitcoin conference last year in Vegas, which was end of May, I think nobody cared about our underlying business. So my investor conversation was really focusing on how we can raise funds and buy Bitcoin. But on the back of my mind, and I also verbalize this to investors, is like, but we have a growing underlying business, which is going to be more important when the market goes away for Bitcoin for some time or cools down for Bitcoin for some time. Then we have the underlying business to be more defensive in terms of valuation, in terms of finding support for the stock. And I think that, and I was telling investors, I'm like, I think that's going to come into focal point into 2026. But of course, I'm wrong because I think it became the focus in the end of Q3, the end of third quarter, going into the fourth quarter. I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, okay, aside from just raising money and buying Bitcoin, these listed companies should have an underlying operating business that's growing and generating cash flow as well. So I think having that, I guess, professional training before starting DDC really helps me now just to put things in broader perspective.
Yeah, and that's something that I think we want to approach this year, and we want our audience to approach this year to really understand more of the public equity side of Treasury companies, how they're affected by traditional institutional investors, how adoption does take time. So even though we're all maxis and believe that hyper Bitcoinization is around the corner, I think that's what gets the clicks with different podcasts or live streams or anything that you're doing. So some of it takes a lot of time. And so from your perspective as like 10 years experience equity analyst, understanding that these things will take time for investors willing to do, convertible, because I'll pause on that point is strategy. I think it was interesting to see people understand the early converts with the bonds that they were doing, and then realizing, or the public realizing, oh, this is just an arb happening from shorting the common stock and then buying the convert. And it wasn't just institutional long-term belief and strategy. They just saw a good arb trade to do with let's say like a hedge fund that would be investing in that. So now they've obviously switched to more of these preferred equities, which isn't battling these bond traders and just having a market that can be arbed so easily. For you, it's good to have some perspective going into that on what companies will actually invest in and like how quickly they'll invest in it. It sounds like with your current offering that's private, you're letting that interest mature a little bit before. Is there anything else you see other treasury companies doing? You don't have to name anyone specific, but that are maybe too aggressive or moving too quickly where you said, hey, we don't want to do that. That's not a strategy we want to employ right away.
Oh, I want to say no. No,
Yeah.
I haven't noticed any other Bitcoin treasury company do anything that I would say uh, that I strongly opposed to, because I think everybody. I mean, look, most of us adopting this strategy has really been running the treasury side of the business for less than a year, and
Yeah.
it's still such early stage. And I think everybody, especially from I would say April all the way through October of last year, for that 6 months period, everybody pretty much followed the same playbook, right? Raise capital, you buy Bitcoin, and you repeat. But what's exciting now, I think, as we look into 2026 and beyond, is I think we're going to see the playbook gets evolved and
Mhm.
be. I think operators like us will be more creative and innovative in terms of what we can do with a growing Bitcoin stack. So yeah, I think no one's doing anything extremely wrong. I think it's still such early stage for all of us. I think it's an open book. We can all try new things, and it'll be exciting to see how this industry evolves over time in the next couple years ahead.
I guess looking at that specifically, as you're talking to, I guess, either other private company CEOs or public company CEOs that have not adopted Bitcoin treasury strategy, I'm guessing you have at least a few of these conversations from time to time. What are they thinking about with this? Like, what are the concerns that they have? We're probably all aware of the interview that Saylor did a few weeks ago, where it was sort of asked how many companies could have this. And rather than focus on that, I'm just curious, like, are those discussions happening in private with others? And certainly, I don't want you to name any companies, but what are the types of questions you get because you've adopted this? You've been an early adopter, and there's a lot less, within Asia, certainly within consumer brands.
Yeah.
You're definitely a leader there. So I'm curious what you hear from others there.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some friends that, run businesses in the consumer space and in other industry, both private and listed. And, when they ask me what I've been up to, I'm like, food and Bitcoin. That's also, usually a great conversation starter. But I think for listed company CEO friends, I think the first question I get from them is, why Bitcoin? And I share of our conviction for Bitcoin as the only store of value as a class that we believe in. Once we get through that, and I also share with them like our concerns as a business operator, because we work so hard to defend our margin, to squeeze profits every year, but then we see that cash and money erode over time, and it happens so quietly that we don't really notice it. I mean, especially in 2023, when RMB basically devalued by 10% against the US dollar, for us, that was very noticeable. And I explained to them, and I think you can see their minds moving, and their eyes just kind of like, yeah, they can feel it, because I'm sure they also go through the same challenges running and operating business. So I think it's interesting to see people especially people in my network, are open to that conversation, and at least they want to learn more, and they don't just say, oh, those are, I don't believe in crypto, I don't think that works at all. I think for the friends that I have that run private and listed companies, they're actually very open in terms of exploring these strategies. But of course, there's limitation, right? If they're listed in Hong Kong, they might have less flexibility in terms of really putting the digital asset treasury at the forefront of running their business. But yeah, I think overall the conversations I've had so far, they're very open-minded, they're very curious, and they want to learn what my journey has been. So yeah, I do believe more and more companies will adopt this going forward, especially in markets that supports Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
Yeah, we talk about Bitcoin obviously as a Bitcoin show, but it is crazy to think about hard assets and corporations investing in hard assets and even other companies is really proving to be, by far the like best performing strategy. I think the really funny one is FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. Anthropic, the company behind Claude, and Claude Cowork has been all over Twitter and X and the news as this amazing evolution in AI and working with AI. He was an early investor in Anthropic with FTX, and that I think that particular investment could have probably paid back all the creditors within the bankruptcy and then probably some profit as well. And it's crazy to think about such a a convoluted scam of money moving back and forth with Alameda, but still holding early stage equity in an asset like Anthropic stock will still outperform if FTX held cash itself. Do you guys ever look at? And I know you're talking about buying up consumer brands in the U.S. for different Asian foods. How do you approach just your M&A and looking at other brands to add to the portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different M&A opportunities in the consumer space, both in Asian markets and in the US. Just I think because in the past couple of years in capital markets, it's harder for consumer companies to list on their own and to have their exits. So we do get approached by different brands and say they want to be acquired or they want to be part of a portfolio and part of a listed platform. And the way we look at it is really and we've learned our lessons in the deals that we've done. And I think, when we look at M&A opportunities, we definitely look for synergies in the underlying business, whether we can scale faster and get more operational efficiencies out of the acquisition. So at the end of the day, it's still about generating sustainable long-term value for the shareholder through strengthening our ability to generate more profits by doing these M&A opportunities. And so I think, and I talked about our vision for the operating business in 2026. It was for the time being, it's really focusing on growing organically. But that's not to say that we might not do a potential M&A down the road in the next 12 months, because there are a lot of really exciting brands out there. But we are super, super, once again, the word discipline, that we will only buy cash flow positive and profitable businesses to add to the portfolio. And I think what we can offer our potential partner is now, once you become part of the DDC portfolio, there's going to be operational efficiencies. And as part of the listed company and part of the shareholder going forward, you also get upside to Bitcoin, to the growing Bitcoin reserve that we're building, which as a standalone smaller consumer businesses, it might be harder for them to replicate that. So for us, it's really exciting. I mean, we do have tons of opportunities going forward. And so, if we have to really finalize the three things that we want to focus on in 2026 is growing the underlying business organically, continue to grow our Bitcoin stack in a very disciplined manner, and explore profitable M&A opportunities.
Wow, I think that's something that probably sets you apart, because I don't know that I could name another company that's going to have like those three key sort of elements to be able to do that, right? Like different companies within the Bitcoin space have taken their focus in different areas, certainly with the preferred shares with Strategy and a couple other companies there, or other things that they've done. So I think I'm fumbling with what I'm trying to say, but it makes me more bullish as a shareholder, I guess, to sort of hear that it's not just the Bitcoin story, but it's, more about the operating business and everything else, which is what you've said consistently from the get-go, right? Like that's what you said, I think, when you were introducing the strategy publicly back in May, I think it was, in Las Vegas. So that's really good to hear. I guess in terms of, your markets are a lot in Asia, but you're listed in the US. And as a consumer brand this year, I'm just curious what it's looking like in Asia, because I don't have a lot of read on that in terms of the market and everything else. Because what we're hearing in the U.S. is, energy and, those types of things are going to do well. And a lot of the consumer and brand focused companies and software companies are going to do less well. That's what I hear in terms of the macro takes. Is that the same for what we're hearing in Asia? Are there headwinds in that, or is it different since the economies are very different from the US economy?
Yeah, I mean, for the main business, the main market that we're operating is mainland China, and then exporting to Southeast Asian markets. We're seeing strong demand for our products, but I think particularly because the pricing of our product is more mass market focused, also very affordable, convenient meal solutions. In the past couple of years, I mean, the China economy has also been challenging, and so we do see softer consumer demands, but really more focused on the higher end products or middle to higher end products really suffered from year-on-year growth or very significant year-on-year decline. And I think 2023 onwards, we're very, very fortunate that our portfolio, since day one, when we entered the mainland China market, has been targeting the mass consumer. We want to develop and create products that are accessible to everybody. We want to cook at home. And so the price point really helped us in this downturn in consumer demand. It's really coming to play in 2024 and then 2025 results. And then, we did see some, margin, I would say, pressure if we only operate in the mainland China market because of intense competition. So we started planning ahead and building the exporting business towards the end of 2024. And once again, that grew really nicely into the second half of 2025. So I think in 2026, I would expect still very healthy demand for our products organically in the mainland China market. And we are probably going to see more exciting growth numbers coming out from Southeast Asia.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I think we've seen like a mix of, on the Bitcoin side, audience and consumer adoption with Bitcoin. We were at Brian as well was at Bitcoinization in Hong Kong, and there's very strong turnout. I feel like we have to figure out what the use case is. You can't push a use case of the white paper says, hey, this is going to be the ability for, peer-to-peer transactions. Well, there's a lot of options there. There's a lot of really good tech companies that allow you to pay people quickly. And there's a, ton of interest in altcoins. And we've seen, the growth of those. We've seen the growth of Tron, which is, we used to be the biggest chain that USDT was on for, in Latin American payments, between two individuals outside of the state. Do you believe, just with this competition, for the peer-to-peer transactions, do you believe the store of value use case, corporates holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet, might be the bigger growth factor for Bitcoin in Asia overall?
From the investor conversations I have in mainland China, Hong Kong market, and other parts of Asia, I think is more definitely the broader adoption and acceptance of Bitcoin and going into mainstream with ETFs and also bigger organization institutions and listed companies starting to adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet and the portfolio. I think that's where I see a lot of institutional and ultra high net worth family offices start to get serious interest into adding Bitcoin into their own portfolio. And by them thinking about adding Bitcoin, then they look into their equities exposure into Bitcoin related stocks. That's when they have conversations with me because they're familiar with our underlying business, they understand it, and then they're like, oh, okay, on top of that, you also get additional Bitcoin exposure. So I think that's where having that institutional adoption of Bitcoin is really getting more investor interest for the asset class in Asia.
Brian, what do you got? What are you going to wrap with? What's your big one?
I don't know if I've got a big one because I think Norma's done a really good job of explaining a lot about the business and making me more bullish for DDC, at least myself as a current investor. So,
sorry, I think you guys dropped me for 3 seconds.
No worries.
Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Perfect. I guess Jody asked me what my big question for you is, and I said I didn't have one. So I'll just say, what is it that you want to leave DDC investors with, or those who are investing in Bitcoin today as we close out this interview?
Well, thanks for being part of our journey. We really, it's still super early, year one in the Bitcoin Treasury strategy journey for us. Thank you for your support, and we're gonna stay focused and continue to, be disciplined and stay focused on executing the Bitcoin Treasury strategy. So we're really excited for 2026, and hopefully we have more positive news to share with everybody going forward.
Amazing. Yeah, Norma, really appreciate you coming today. I think it's my big takeaways. I love that you're intentional with all the actions you take. I think it's really good to approach first the private investment of the converts before pushing a public offering. See both consumer interest and also consumer education. 21 Rates, we're focused on like Bitcoin lending and Bitcoin personal finance, helping people understand. A lot of people last year, I think, didn't fully understand what it means to have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, what a leveraged Bitcoin equity was. No one even really agreed on the name of Bitcoin treasury companies or DATs or any of the different names that came out. So we really appreciate your long-term focus of being disciplined and let's add Bitcoin over time, but not try to push the idea that leveraged Bitcoin right now, this quarter, is the best investment. Buy our stock. I think it's much better to be looking at let's build a really good business, cash flowing, and acquire other good cash flowing businesses that also we're going to hold that Bitcoin on the balance sheet, investing those profits. So Norma, I think it's a really good way to start the year, and we'll have to have you back on soon.
Thank you, Jody. Good to see you again, Brian.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for all the things that you shared today, and look forward to seeing what comes next for DDC.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And so we're going to take a little break here, and then we'll jump on Wyatt O'Rourke from Basilic Financial. And then also for the audience, if you haven't done it yet, 21rates.com/stack. Great way to start using Lightning, spin the wheel, earn some sats, some great learning opportunities. You can also learn some sats. And we want everyone to start using Bitcoin, interacting with it. And so go to that, scan the QR code or go to the URL, 21rates.com/stack, and get started. Amazing. Thanks, guys.
I said a hip hop, the hip it to the hip hop, you don't stop the rocker to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie to beat. Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet. You see, I am Wonder Mike, and I like to say hello. Up to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, and the purple, and yellow. But first, I gotta bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie. Say up, jump the boogie to the bang, bang, boogie. Let's rock. You don't stop, rock the rhythm that'll make your body rock. Well, so far you've heard my voice, but I brought two friends along. And next on the mic is my man Hank. Come on, Hank, sing that song.
Check it out, I'm the CASN, the OVA, and the rest is FLY. You see, I go by the code of the doctor of the mix, and these reasons I'll tell you why. You see, I'm 6'1", and I'm tons of fun, and I dress to a T. You see, I got more clothes than Muhammad Ali, and I dress so viciously. I got bodyguards, I got two big cars that definitely ain't the whack. I got a Lincoln Continental and a sunroof Cadillac. So after school, I take a dip in the pool, which is really on the wall. I got a color TV so I can see the Knicks play basketball. Him and talking about checkbook, that it costs more money than a sucker could ever spend. But I wouldn't give a sucker or a punk from the rock and not a dime till I made it again. Everybody go, hotel, motel, what you gonna do today? Is I'm gonna get a fly girl, gonna get some spank and drive off in a death OJ. Everybody go, hotel, motel, holiday inn. See, if your girl starts acting up, then you take her friend. I'm Master G, I'm out mellow, it's on you, so what you gonna do?
Well, it's on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I said a M-A-S, a T-E-R, a G with a double E. I said I go by the unforgettable name of the man they call a Master G. Well, my name is known all over the world by all the foxy ladies and the pretty girls. I'm going down in history as the baddest rapper that ever could be. Now I'm feeling the highs and you're feeling the lows. The beat starts getting into your toe. You start popping your fingers and stomping your feet and moving your body while you're sitting and you're sitting. Then damn, you start doing the freak. I said bam, right out of your seat. Then you throw your hands high in the air. You rock it to the rhythm, shake your dairy air. You rock it to the beat without a care. Cruise the short shot MCs for the affair. Now I'm not as tall as the rest of the gang, but I rap to the beat just the same. I got a little face and a pair of rhyme eyes. All I'm here to do, ladies, is hypnotize. Sing it on and on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on like a hot butter. The pop, give it, pop, the pop, pop. You don't dare stop or come alive, yo. Give me what you got. I guess by now you can take a hunch and find that I am the baby of the bunch, but that's okay. I still keep in stride, cause all I'm here to do is just a wiggle your behind. Sing it on and on and on and on. The beat don't stop until the break of dawn. I sing it on and on and on and on and on. Rock, yo. Throw it on the floor. I'm gonna freak you here, I'm gonna freak you there. I'm gonna move you out of this atmosphere, cause I'm one of a kind and I'll shock your mind. I put the jiggles in your behind. I say the 1, 2, 3, 4, come on, girls, get it on the floor. Come alive, yo, give me what you got, cause I'm guaranteed to make you rock. I said 1, 2, 3, 4, tell me one to Mike, what are you waiting for?
To the hip hop, the hippie to the hippie, the hip hip, the hopper, you don't stop. Rock it to the bang, bang the boogie, say up, jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie beat. Well, skittle-a-bebop, we rock a Scooby-Doo. And guess what, America, we love you, cause you rock in a row with us so much so you can rock till you're 101 years old. I don't mean to brag, I don't mean to boast, but we're like hot butter on a breakfast toast. Rock it out, a baby bubba to the boogie, then bang bang the boogie to the beat. Beat is so unique. Come on, everybody, and dance to the beat. Hip hop, you don't stop. Rock it out, baby, bubba to the boogity bang bang, the boogie to the boogity beat. I say I can't wait to the end of the week when I rap it to the rhythm of a groovy beat and attempt to raise your body heat or just blow your mind so with that you can't speak or do a thing but a rock and shuffle your feet and later change up to a dance called the freak. And when you finally do come into your rhythmic beat, rest a little while so you don't get weak. I know a man in Hank, he has more rhymes than a serious bank, so come on, Hank, I'll sing that song until the rhythm of the boogie, the bang, bang, the bomb.
When I'm pimp, the dimp, the ladies pimp, the women fight for my delight, but I'm the grand master with the 3 MCs that shock the house for the young ladies. And when you come inside and to the front, you do the freak spank or do the bump. And when the sucker MCs try to prove a point with Treasury's trio, or when the serious joiner from sun to sun and from day to day, I sit down and write a brand new rhyme because they say that miracles never cease. I've created a devastating masterpiece. I'm gonna rock the mic so you can't resist. Everybody, I say it goes like this. When I was coming home late one dark afternoon, reporter stopped me for an interview. She said she's heard stories and she's heard fables that are vicious on the mic and the turntable. This young reporter I did adore, so I rocked the vicious rhyme like I never did before. She said, damn fly guy, I'm in love with you. And Casanova legend must have been true. I said, by the way, baby, what's your name? Said I go by the name Lois Lane, and you can be my boyfriend, you surely can. Just let me quit my boyfriend called Superman. I said, he's a fairy, I do suppose, flying through the air in pantyhose. He may be very sexy or even cute, but he looks like a sucker in a blue and red suit. I said, you need a man who's got finesse and his whole name across his chest. He may be able to fly all through the night, but can he rock a party till the early light? He can't satisfy you with his little worm, but I can bust you out with my super sperm. I go do it, I go do it, I go do it, do it, do it. And I'm here, and I'm there. I'm Big Bang Hank, I'm everywhere. Just throw your hands up in the air and party harder like you just don't care. Let's do it. Don't stop, y'all. Take a talk, y'all. You don't stop. Go home, tell, motel. What you gonna do today? Someone get a fly girl, gonna get some spank and drive off in a death OJ. Everybody go home, tell, motel, Holiday Inn. You say if your girl starts acting up, then you take a friend. I say skip, dive, what can I say? I can't fit them all inside my OJ, so I just take half and bust them out. I give the rest of him after key so he can shock the house.
It was 12 o'clock on one Friday night. I was rocking to the beat, feeling alright. Everybody was dancing on the floor, doing all the things they never did before. And then this fly girl with a sexy lead, she came into the party, she came into the scene. As she traveled deeper inside the room, all the fellas checked out her white ass shoe. She came up to the table, looked into my eyes, then she turned around and she got behind. So I said to myself, it's time for me to release my vicious rhyme. I call my masterpiece. And now people in the house, this is just for you. A little rap to make you boogaloo. Now the group you hear is called Phase 2. And let me tell you something, we're a hell of a crew. Once a week, we're on the street just to cutting the jams and making it free. For you to party, got to have the mood to we'll get right down and give you a groove. For you to dance, you got to be hot, so we'll get right down and make it rock. Now the system's on and the girls are there, you definitely have a rockin' affair. But let me tell you something, there's still one fact, that to have a party, got to have a rap. So when the party's over, you're making it home and trying to sleep before the break of dawn. And while you're sleeping, you start to dream and think of how you danced on a disco scene. A name appears in your mind, yeah, a name you know that was right on time. It was Phase 2, or just a doing a do, rocking you down, cause you know we good to the rhythm of the beat that makes you free. Come alive, girl, get on your feet, to the rhythm of the beat, to the beat, to the double beat that it makes you freak, to the rhythm of the beat that says you go on and on until the break of dawn. I got the man coming on right now, he's guaranteed to throw down. He goes by the name of Wonder Mike. Come on, Wonder Mike, do what you like.
I say a can of beer that's sweeter than honey, like a millionaire that has no money, like a rainy day that is not wet, like a gambler fiend that does not bet, like Dracula without his fangs, like
Wyatt, how we doing?
I'm good, Jody. How are
Let's
you,
get the
man?
music off. Yeah, good to see you. How you been?
Likewise. I'm good, man. I'm good. Excited for 2026 here.
Yeah, it's good to catch up. We haven't been to the space yet in Denver. I haven't been to Denver since we've met, but when I am, great Bitcoin community. You guys have been building, been doing events. I don't know if Avi's invited, but hopefully you'll let him in as well.
Well, somebody has to pay for not putting us on S tier the other day. I don't know which one of you wants to take the fall for that, but we need some heads to roll.
That's true. It's true. We're getting a new tier list going. We'll bring you back on for a tier list specifically.
All right. Yeah, I'll make our case.
Well, awesome. So everyone in the audience, we just had DDC CEO Norma Chu on. So great to see. Let's approach. I mean, certainly from the Bitcoiner side, we would need to rethink how we think about Bitcoin treasury companies. I thought it was refreshing just to see the intentionality behind, hey, let's buy Bitcoin. Now that we're at 88, it's a good time to buy Bitcoin. But let's not oversell to the public the reasons to buy a public equity over just stacking sats like we like to do on the daily stack. We like cold hard sats in cold storage. You start there as your threshold. And not trying to sell everyone everything all at once. Know what you're investing in, and we're here to educate you. So, Wyatt, tell us a little bit about yourself just to give a background, and then we want to jump into some news.
Yeah, sure thing. I'm the founder of Basilic Financial. We're a wealth management firm specifically focused on serving Bitcoiners, and we help people with sound money solutions. And yeah, it's funny, Jody. It's like we try very hard, and we're extremely intentional about our Bitcoin exposure being cold storage, bare asset Bitcoin. So that's something fundamental in our practice. I'm also the co-founder of Pax Partners. It's a private credit fund investing in Bitcoin collateralized loans. So kind of doing some work on the investment issuer front in the digital credit space, and then also help start the space in Denver, where Bitcoin Citadel, co-working, social club, event space, all that sort of stuff. And then also the author of the Bitcoinization of Finance.
Love it. And I'm just finishing lunch here. So I popped in a minute late.
What did we get for lunch? What was on the menu?
I was trying to eat light, man. I had a salad. I did have some spicy Caesar dressing, which probably was not the healthiest, but you got to do what you can do. Wyatt, good to see you again, man. I know we had met back in New York. Feels probably close to a year ago now, but great to have you back. So I want to just touch on like the gold Bitcoin situation right now. So gold hit a historic high over 5,000. Bitcoin slumped to a 5-week low. This digital gold narrative that we're starting to hear about now too, with the potential new Fed chair. Curious, just like while we've seen gold soar, Bitcoin's dropped 10%. As an advisor, how are you talking with some of your clientele? I know majority of them are Bitcoin friendly, but has that come up where, you know, some of your clients are asking, hey, I'm missing the silver run, I'm missing this gold run, what's happening here? So curious how those discussions are going.
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting. I do have clients with, you know, exposure to precious metals. I'm not like a huge precious metal hater, but, you know, compared to Bitcoin, it's like, well, why won't we just, own Bitcoin? I will, preference this with educational purposes only, not financial advice. But I think, when we zoom out here, it's like, well, what's really the macro trend driving this, right? And I think it's really this return to scarce real world hard assets. And I think the fiat game, like the cat's out of the bag there. I think the largest capital allocators in the world, i.e. central banks and large institutions, are privy to that information. I think, they're probably the largest structural buyers in the precious metal market. Silver is a little bit more interesting, obviously, just because there's a little bit more of an industrial component to that. I think it's actually single digit percentage. Somebody fact checked me on that, but people love to play up that narrative. And I think it's just kind of like one of the weaker ones. So what we really want to focus on is people don't want to hold dollars, and they don't want to hold debt that is denominated in dollars. They want real world physical assets, specifically scarce assets. And I think, Bitcoin fits that narrative better than these precious metals. And I'm seeing a lot more pictures on Twitter as well as, tungsten, coated in gold or silver coated in gold. And, as a Bitcoiner, I think it's hilarious because, we don't trust verify, the fungibility of Bitcoin. Like there's so many properties of Bitcoin that make it, better or more practical than these precious metals, but we're still seeing kind of, I think, this gut reaction where it's like, okay, I can't hold dollars anymore. Let me just buy, gold here. But to your point, Jody, too, about the Treasury companies, it's like, okay, well, what do we really want exposure to here? How synthetic is our exposure? And I think those are all real questions and concerns that should be people should be asking. If you just want exposure to an asset, like if you're piling into a paper gold ETF, like, okay, sure, you're getting some exposure to the price run up, but are you even in it for like the right reasons, or fiat gold? And it's like, well, why are you purchasing gold to begin with? In that case. And I do think it is interesting, like the market's perspective on things. And this is kind of how I lead my conversation with folks that are interested in Bitcoin treasuries, where it's like, we have to understand, like, we're wading into fiat games here. I could, make the case, as we all could, until we're blue in the face, on why Bitcoin has better properties than gold. But we have to take a step back. It's like, well, the price of anything is the market's perception of it, right? And I still think largely, even though I think it's incorrect, the market views Bitcoin as more of a risk-on asset, or or gold or silver here is being kind of more viewed as a flight to safety asset. I do think that will capitulate. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. Sorry, just to piggyback on that, because you were talking about like the tungsten painted with gold. I was just pulling up some tweets that were roughly about a year ago, February of last year. Elon Musk was demanding that we went to Fort Knox and live stream to make sure the gold was still there. Now, that kind of went away real quick, right? No one's talking about this anymore. Yeah. And my assumption is if Trump saw that there was no gold, that story disappeared very quickly. So, this last summer, people were talking about paper Bitcoin summer. Is this paper gold summer that we're about to see here shortly?
Well, I think it's been a paper gold century. It's some alarming statistics. And I think, people have been, crying wolf that the gold markets are manipulated for decades now. I think that's probably true. The mechanism that it's able to be manipulated is via paper. 99.6% of COMEX futures, gold futures, settle in cash. So the bare asset is never actually settling and trading in kind. I do get kind of worried. There's a bit of a concentration risk in gold where a lot of the paper issuers custody a lot of the gold, and there's just room for shenanigans in that kind of setup.
Yeah, I think on the other side that you were looking at or talking about is central banks buying gold and silver right now. Like there's the phrase, coming like in the 90s, 80s and 90s and really 2000s of tech of nobody's gotten fired for buying IBM. Right. If you're a CTO, if you're a big technology purchasing agent at a large enterprise, if you were buying up IBM servers on racks, no one was going to fire you for that decision. It was a very easy thing. It's a safe thing. I think the same thing with capital allocators at these different Federal Reserves of these different countries, of these central banks. No one's going to lose their job for buying gold and silver. If they bought Bitcoin and it dropped 10K, if we saw the pullback from 126 down to 86 or 84, 82, they're probably losing their job. And it's just not, the upside isn't worth it. They're not going to get all the credit or be able to take the credit personally, or, they're not paid on commission. They don't get a carry on how the central bank performs. So I think it's a job saving thing, and countries move slow.
Totally. I mean, I think that's a very viable thesis. I think a lot of times, just in general, folks on Twitter, market commentators in general, don't give enough credit to the human aspect of this all, right? Yeah. And I think you're totally right, Jody. And sure, it is a risk. I think there's a lot of self-imposed regulations and groupthink, into the space. And up until pretty recently, within the last 10 years for sure, it may have even been the last 5, the Basel Committee on, international banking, was a committee out of the Bank of International Settlements. Their risk-weighted adjustment for gold really penalized banks and, what they could hold on their balance sheet. They didn't really view it as, a more pristine, I think Bitcoin is the pristine, collateral. Gold slightly under that, certainly better than most, forms of collateral and an asset in general. But they actually, penalize banks, for holding a lot of gold. You had to, mark it down, correspondingly on your balance sheet with the liabilities, or hold, a certain corresponding amount of other, assets to kind of offset that. So that's a fairly, new change. And I think they're obviously doing that in their favor. So it's easier for, banks to, custody gold. And I think they're, if I was in the position of any central banker, I think my game theory would suggest that I need to try to recapitalize my local economy. And it's like, well, how do you do that? Like you bring in, hard assets. And so I think, those two moves kind of go hand in hand. And I think it's easier for these folks to kind of, see around the corner a little bit when they're the ones that are setting the policies to begin with. So to your point, Jody, it's not lost on me.
I was just pulling up a chart here during midterms, because that's coming up soon, and that's a lot of the macro. You see a lot of
pull it up.
Manipulation. I'm
Let's
scared
get some
to pull
visuals
it up.
in here.
Mess up the. I'll try it out here. Let me share the screen here. This is interesting.
Got to keep the intern honest.
Let's see this here.
No, take your time.
That pull up. Let me zoom in here real quick.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So we're seeing here, average return is negative 65% during midterm years. And so this was from December 12th last year. So it's begun, obviously, in 2026. So how much are you looking at this? Everyone's talking about like the 4-year cycles as being dead. Things change, like you want to look at history, obviously, but curious, like how you look at these 4-year cycles, the midterm years, all these historical prices. Like ultimately, that's what happened. And I always I joke with my friends because I don't do charts a ton, because that is what happened, and everything is, like you said, based off kind of news flow, momentum. Charts obviously do matter, but ultimately, that doesn't predict the future. It shows what happened previously, right? And so, how are you taking a look at stuff like this, like the midterms and the 4-year cycles?
Yeah, this is interesting. I have not seen that graph. And when we're talking about like the human element, specifically, when it comes to like midterm years, I bet there's just kind of like this group thing to your point, Jody. It's like IBM, like what works, what's not going to rock the boat too much, just because there's so much other, volatility, in the air, people, estimating and, placing bets on, if one party wins over the other, how's that going to affect, X, Y, or Z. So I think there's just kind of more commotion and chaos in the ether that leads to short-term, thinking. My general thesis, though, is that the 4-year cycles in Bitcoin are dead. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball until I'm proven otherwise. It's just a guess. But I just think there's been kind of some structural realignment in the market. I'm not sure if you guys caught Jody Visner's piece at the end of the year. I think that was really interesting.
What do you say for me and everyone else out there asking that question?
Yeah. So he made a really interesting, qualitative analysis or perspective that Bitcoin was going through its IPO moment. And what we saw on chain, and this is validated by folks, like James Check, is that we saw older coins moving for the first time in a long time. And Jody, kind of made the assessment that, comparing Bitcoin to an IPO, were like the oldest shareholders, the people that took the most risk by getting in the earliest, are kind of taking some of their gains off the table. And use a few examples, if you have billions of dollars in Bitcoin wealth, who am I to tell you don't take the chips off the table? I don't personally think rotating into cash or whatever is necessarily the greatest idea. But if you want to buy a 50,000 acre ranch in Montana, like, have at it, man. Like, you earned it as far as I'm concerned. But what we're seeing there. So it's like, okay, old coins moving, odd, interesting dynamic. I think there's just been a ton of institutional buyers, coming into the market. The Bitcoin Treasury, phenomena, there's a lot to say on it, but, these are large balance sheets that intend or have a mandate to buy, a lot of spot Bitcoin. And so I don't think that demand is really, going away, even if like the stock price of all of them have been pretty hammered, over the last, 6-9 months. And then two, I think, the Fed share conversation is pretty interesting. I think regardless of who ends up taking that position, what we're really kind of seeing in the US is a consolidation of power in the executive branch. I think this has been happening, prior to the Trump administration, but I think it's just Trump style to put a ton of pressure on whoever takes that position to lower rates and inject liquidity into the system. And, my kind of general view on macroeconomics to begin with, to get to your point specifically, Avi, is it's really easy. We're talking about very large, complex systems. It's very easy to cherry pick variables and paint your own picture. So it's like, midterm years, markets down, plus this variable, plus this variable. I can paint my own picture. I'm just leaving out a million other variables, right, that could have a potential, impact on, whatever the market does. So it will certainly be interesting. I'm going to strap in. I'm along for the ride.
I just pulled this up real quick. So Rick Reeder, who you're talking about, Jody, has now taken the lead. It's been pretty crazy. Hassett had the lead for a while. Kevin Warsh looked like a sure shot, and now Rick Reeder is looking like he's running away with it here. Former BlackRock, they
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Into everything.
Yeah, right. Of course, snakes. But that's what I'm saying too. How many times over the last 3 to 6 months has the lead switched? At least 3. And so it's like, is Trump just doing Trump things and leading us all to believe this, that, or the other? Is this? I do think these prediction markets are kind of fascinating phenomena in themselves. I'm curious, like, what kind of staying power they'll have in the future, and if this is just like a mainstay of general analysis. You can bet on whatever. It's certainly interesting getting these insights, but then how big I imagine the volume on this market is probably higher than most, but are these just people trying to make a quick buck too? And it's like, if it's flip flopping that aggressively this quickly, how good of an indicator is it actually?
Yeah, I think that's what we're learning is seeing how much how closely each of these markets ties to sentiment. I think when you have something huge like presidential election, you have so many people that are tied into the outcome, tied into like what's happening with it. But with every other market, it's like, how much is it being manipulated? Like, who has inside info, to those, how fast does it go? But I do think some people go off of like Twitter sentiment, X sentiment, and to make decisions. And the algo's feeding you what you see. It's so driven by, like what you're seeing in Minnesota. It could be for or against, and the commentators doing their quick 1-minute video takes on that is very driven by it, or what the pictures they show you. So it's an echo chamber. I think at least I think this is a good evolution of people getting their quick soundbite news, because it's driven by, the markets themselves. And so people putting money behind it. So even if they have an agenda, are they going to bet on it if they don't truly believe in it? Probably not, because they should be like incentivized not to bet against themselves, or not incentivized not to lose money.
Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. Don't forget. So
yeah,
he's like the heart. His markets are extremely fun because it could be down 50 points and then change on a tweet. And so that's what we've seen here now with the Fed share. It's based off commentary he says, and it is interesting. I wonder how like funds, and I'd love to bring some more quants on that are creating these algorithms and the hedge funds that are tracking sentiment, because now with all the bots, someone could just pay a bot farm to just say NVIDIA is to the moon, and they may want to short that, or, it could change the dynamics quite a bit. So we're living in amazing times, as they say. But
so many variables.
Yeah. Joe, you got another one? Let me pull up a few other questions I had.
I do, but it's going to take a minute.
All right. Before you, then I'll ask, what are your thoughts on like the Clarity Act? Obviously, like that's been in the headlines. People will kind of just read the headline, myself included, often. And so I'd like to dig in further on that. I know it's mostly around stable coins, but curious around the impact, you see with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm generally view legislative moves like broadly in this space as a positive thing, just because the last administration was so antagonistic to the industry at large. My kind of general view on stable coins is I think it's petrodollar 2.0, 3.0, whatever it really is. This is just a clever way for them to drum up artificial demand for treasuries by being dollar or dollar backed, treasury backed, whatever. So I'm not particularly interested in them. I give the powers that be a ton of props. They are extremely creative at drumming up this artificial demand for dollars, whatever time period it may be. Like their incentive structures are obviously very aligned to do so. And who would have thought 5 years from now that stable coins were going to be that mechanism. So we do kind of have to give them a tip of the cap for managing these, pull these rabbits out of their hat. So I don't think that gets me, particularly, excited. I'm kind of sympathetic to the argument that, the global South this is easier for them, improves their life. Like, sure, have at it. I'm not going to, poo-poo that. What I'm hesitant to believe, though, is I've heard in the narrative that this helps onboard people to Bitcoin. I don't know if that's actually necessarily the case. Like my concern, as a Bitcoiner, what this would be is you were kind of just going 50%, right? So it's like, it is still dollars. It's digital dollars. We have digital dollars now. Sure, it's easier for people access. I think people are going to largely, at least in the early years, think of this as like, okay, I'm like crypto native. I use stable coins, yada, yada, whatever it may be. And they're just going to get complacent with that and fail to get all the way to Bitcoin. And I think, as us as a Bitcoin community, if we let that happen, if we're, satisfied with people just using stable coins, we would ultimately kind of fail in our duty of, explaining all the kind of, little things that go into that privacy protection, freedom, being full control of your wealth. Like, we're just going to forego all that. And I would be very sad if that was the end game.
Yeah, it's two sides though. You can
yeah, just trashing stable coins.
Bring the soundboard in.
It's the Bitcoin show.
No, you can see both sides. You get nervous with like the CBDC conversations. There's still like 180 countries building that. They're not just wasting money. I don't think. But there is. I just see that we're in this world of transparency now. I was just talking about this with my nanny, funny enough, and I was saying back in the 1960s, you could have gotten away with a lot of stuff as president. There's not 1,000 cell phones filming everything. We just saw this in Minneapolis. Like, the government may try to say one thing, and then there's all these videos that are showing another thing, and it's constant back and forth, right? So do you think that the like stable coins with all the engineers and hackers and how smart people are provides a level of transparency of printing money? We assume they're being honest when they say they're printing X amount of money, but we have no way of like necessarily tracking that. But with stable coins, you potentially could, if it's all on chain.
Yeah, I think there's probably shades of privacy. I think if the stablecoin issuers predominantly stay private companies, like Tether, I think there's more transparency than if this was strictly a government-backed project, which is like probably the fastest way to the CBDC you could possibly sign up for. And I'm staunchly opposed to that. And if it's government anything, I'm just going to assume it's fake and manipulated and not real.
They take Circle though, and say it's a national security thing, and we need to take out Circle. We need to
check out their data. Yeah.
I think that's totally on the table. If I was an executive at Tether, Circle, or something like that, I think you got to be bringing out your risk board, and game theory planning through a couple different scenarios. I think that's a non-0% probability of happening. And then, we did the same thing with Fannie and Freddie. I think those markets obviously went to shit afterwards. Like I'm a pretty conservative guy. If would like the government to be, exactly. They're going to ruin it.
I'll say it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I prefer the government to be as small as possible. So I have zero faith, really, if these projects working, if the government takes them over, and then you should just assume they are as surveilled as possible if that's the case. So what does transparency mean then if we know X amount of coins are in circulation?
Yeah. So let's go to, I think, one of my favorite tweets I saw that yesterday. And this is like gets into stable coins, micropayments. The agent economy is here. I think the Claude bot is the hot topic that most people are seeing somewhere on their timeline, this little lobster that somehow is this like autonomous AI agent. So you can do a lot of really cool things. Not recommended for complete novices, but it's really opening up the building of custom agents that you can say, hey, Claude bot, I want to go make money online, buying and selling, either through direct trading, or I want to go sell assets or do e-commerce. And so the really funny thing is now that we give these agents control over, say, stable coins, or even if we give them a Lightning wallet, they're going to be the ones spending and making the decisions. And then we'll start to really see, how does transparency come into play, and how are we supposed to know, even if it is transparent, within like the thousands and millions and billions of microtransactions that are going to happen on the web? How do you sort through that quickly to figure out what was an agent transaction, which wasn't? If you guys can't read this, it's basically saying the AI agent went rogue. He saw like 3 Alex Hormozy clips on YouTube, the guy that's talking about 10X in your business. And then suddenly he's buying the $3,000 course on that. I do think there's going to be a lot of, if AI is making decisions, crazy amount of just psychology on how payments are done. And if you're giving an agent access to your email, to your project management tool, to all of your notes, to all of your personal information, because you wanted the agent to go book your flight, now suddenly you're linking all of your online payments to all of this personal data. So if somebody hacks in, they can also have all your personal data, have your credit cards, or have access to your wallet via the agent, as well as all of this private data that you're using and giving them. So be careful there, guys. If you're on CloudBot, do some security checks. You can just go in the terminal and there's a few prompts to do different security audits. But I think this totally changes the game when we're talking about how people think about all the privacy you're talking about with Bitcoin. And the other point I want to say on the stablecoin side is stablecoins are just dollar, so like the same problems with, not being on a hard money standard are there. And so like stablecoins obviously are great, but they're not like fixing, I think, the underlying issue of people being the Cantillon effect of priced out due to inflation.
I just brought up a tweet here to validate what you were just saying. With all the Claude bots, everything is open now, zero authentication, everything could hit the fan. There's a lot of people getting excited about this, which could open it up for hackers. And just be careful out there before you make an app that tells you what to eat for lunch, which I almost tried to do myself. So gotta be careful. Cool. And then I wanted to ask as well, what are your thoughts overall on like strategy right now? Like where it's at? I'll raise my hand, say I bought near the top. Long term, still believe in it. Haven't sold a share yet, but it is starting to get interesting. If other they have such a lead right now, where if Bitcoin takes off, inherently it should do well. But a lot of money is tied up with these preferred stocks now. A lot of people are taking that trade. I'm assuming you think long term it's going to go up if you're believing in Bitcoin, but just curious, where you're saying, hey, just buy Bitcoin, or is strategy a treasury company you're watching still?
Yeah, I tend to keep my eye on strategy just because, to your point, Avi, it's in a league of its own. I think they crossed the 700,000 Bitcoin threshold, which is just insane, right? Like tip of the cap. I don't know how you can be a hater on that. Mm-hmm. But so when I think of this, starting high level and kind of working down, right? I think this is the Bitcoinization of finance playing out, and we need to embrace traditional financial tools, products, and strategies to get dollars into Bitcoin. Strategy and Saylor really kind of pioneered the common equity, share class way of doing that. I don't think personally common equity is really the best tool to get dollars into Bitcoin, but it does exist. And obviously there are some advantages of being able to play in the traditional capital markets that, have its pros and cons. What I think is particularly interesting about the strategy is the preferred shares. And I do think that treasury companies need to be operating companies. I don't think just throwing a company on the public markets and buying Bitcoin and putting it on your balance sheet is going to be enough to compete in the marketplace. I think you actually need an operating business. And I think strategy's operating business, like, yes, they have like this AI, BI software company that I still get emails from occasionally. I think it's so funny. It's like, no, I got an email from Strategy and they're trying to sell me on business intelligence company.
I will say I found that one of the most interesting things when we went to Strategy World, we were talking because the majority of the people there are actually there for their data side of the business. And so I just, after a couple of beers, I went up and started talking with them and asked them about the business. And I've never seen like people so passionate about data in a software company, but for my 3 or 4, so I'll preface it with that. I talked to like 3 or 4 people, but they all seemed like pretty excited about it. They really enjoyed using it. But to your point, it's like, I think 500 million in revenue,
right?
A drop in the bucket for them.
Well, so it is funny. Like, I think it's good to have an operating business. Like, that's where they started. I'm not saying to, just trash it. I went to Strategy World in 2024 and it's pretty funny. Like, this is all stuff I've just heard, like, circumstantially. I've heard they kind of employ like 20 or so people on the Bitcoin side of thing. Most of their employees are, on this like software product. The employees, run-of-the-mill employees I talked to, they were kind of somewhat interested in the Bitcoin thing, but they were kind of like, this has nothing to do with my day-to-day. I just work here. What's Bitcoin? Kind of more of the vibe, which is just so funny, just given how popular and famous Saylor and
I'm happy about their stock price. We came the year later, and I think everyone was. I'll also preface it with that everyone was pretty out there.
All right, so tell us a little bit about the book you wrote, The Bitcoinization of Finance, and based on your answer you just gave there, It's not about treasury companies. It's not about, getting money, into preferred equities. It's not about, playing options. Love to hear your perspective, that you're going into writing this book. So, for the audience, I think it's a good way to start the year refreshed on like how we look at these things. Just like when we chatted with Norma, I think it was good to have a new lens and lick our wounds a little bit on the treasury company side.
Well, certainly, no, and thanks, Jody. Appreciate the opportunity. My main reason for writing this book is, my previous experiences in TradFi, kind of traditionally trained in finance. I always joke like a lot of good that did me. Went into debt to get like a Keynesian finance degree. It's like would not recommend. I have to live with that. That was a Bitcoiner, but there's so many Bitcoiners that poo-poo finance, and it started to frustrate me. And I think it's kind of disingenuous to think you can reach hyper Bitcoinization without the finance industry. But that's not a blanket defense of the finance industry. I say all the time, like regardless of what industry you work in, it's your responsibility to build that industry within the principle, values, and ethos of Bitcoin. And this is my effort to try to get back to the Bitcoin community that I've gotten so much from, and how kind of theorize how we build the finance industry in a Bitcoinized way. And ultimately, kind of the thesis of the book is a Bitcoinized financial system works if we build it to facilitate Bitcoin, the asset, actually settling and trading in kind. And I think that's really kind of the crux of it. And like, we kind of touched on at the top of the show, we're able to distort so much of the market with the paper layer. Obviously, infinite money supply. If you're constantly, changing the denominator with this, never ending, change in the value of the unit account, you're going to distort markets from literally day one, or the most base market of money. So when we're building a Bitcoinized financial system, tools, products, and strategies need to be built with that in mind. Obviously, I'm a big free market guy. There are, companies that will decide not to do that and just try to make, a quick buck off of Bitcoin's good name. And I think it's really up to us as Bitcoiners to not support them. Don't give them your business, and support the folks doing things the right way. And we just kind of get in the book how that could look, what strategies have been employed. We look at, a few examples. I think a great one is, Andrew Hohn's proposed like the BitBonds idea, and Pierre Rochard started the Bitcoin bond company. It's like those guys obviously didn't invent a bond, right? Yeah. They just applied a bond to Bitcoin to further the betterment of their clients, and I think the Bitcoin industry at large.
Love it. Well, go to 21rates.com and check out. You can buy the book. I think it's on Amazon, I'm assuming, as well. If you can get around the Amazon fees, maybe it's on your website additionally. But if you guys are listening, want to check it out, you can do that. And also, I'll pause real quick to say, for the Friday Stack, you guys got to go to www.21rates.com/stack. And you guys can sign up and earn Bitcoin on the Friday show. So, Jodes, take us away here, sir.
Yeah. So let's go into kind of the next piece I want to focus on is, so our sponsors over Predicts is the first Bitcoin prediction market, which we were just showing before, but let's not dive into like the trading aspect. But Wyatt, I want to get your take on just some of these Bitcoin prediction markets. And the biggest one that surprisingly was around the reduced data temporary soft port activation client. So we had the NOTs versus core debate earlier this year, and this is on Predicts, the biggest market, I believe they said. Sanjay, the co-founder, said that they've had. What was your whole take on that, drama that was like end of last year? And was that something you got into? Did you have clients asking you what your personal take was? And did you have to give them a very technical answer, or how do you explain that to people?
Yeah, it was interesting. I do like to be an active participant in the Bitcoin ecosystem. This not really my lane. I tried to be, have some hubris, when it came to forming an opinion on the whole thing. I think At a certain point, I think people were just having fun with the drama of it all, and it felt like we actually got so far away from the actual, core debate where it was almost more noise and signal, and I kind of got less confident in my response. I did have some clients asking about, it's like, oh, what kind of node should I run? And it's like, I don't know, do your research. I just stay with core because that's what I started with. I'm fairly sympathetic though. I know you got a lot of crap for it, but I'm generally a fan of Bitcoin mechanic. I would like to keep Bitcoin money. I don't necessarily want the blockchain clogged with a bunch of crap. And I don't think I do think we should preserve making it very easy to run a node. I think that that's what keeps the Bitcoin network strong, resilient, decentralized, and just kind of generally high level. I'm probably going to be in favor of the solution that makes it easy and cheap to run nodes.
Yeah. So now we talked about, people making drama. I need to see if there's a good market for this, but the quantum FUD, what's your personal take? Doesn't have to be professional on, I don't know if there's a specific quantum market for Bitcoin.
The search bar.
Yeah. Let's see that. So that's been like the topic of conversation since then. I think you've had Nick Carter come out and saying it's like one of his strongest and biggest focus points. He's also investing, which he has been transparent about, investing in, companies working on quantum, resiliency on Bitcoin. So he obviously is talking up his bag, but he's been honest with that. So not like if he does have conviction, not that he wouldn't invest in that. He is a VC. That is his job. What's been your take? Is it overblown? Do you believe in Jensen saying that it's nowhere close? Or do you think we should be ready for anything given the advances of AI, like Claude this past week and a half?
Yeah, totally. I'm certainly not a technical expert, a little more educated in this topic just because Hunter Beast is a member of the space. He's the author of BIP360. He's a brilliant guy, and he's done a lot of work on this. And he's done a handful of presentations at the space that I've attended, and my kind of understanding is that it's like the older wallet structures that are going to be most susceptible to quantum. And so there's some debate, and I think it should be a debate on what to do with Satoshi's coins. I think he's put together some interesting proposals for that. So if it's like older wallet infrastructure that is most susceptible, personally, I don't think that's too big of a deal. There will only still ever be 21 million Bitcoin in circulation. We could potentially get a supply shock. I think it would really rattle markets, but the most Bitcoin wallets, from my understanding, are already quantum resistant. And there's even like some easy things that are just good hygiene on the blockchain, like not reusing addresses that make newer wallet types not susceptible to quantum attacks. So from a technology perspective, and again, not expert, I think it is largely overblown. And then the quantum narrative itself, I think, is overblown in general too, because when we're talking about like this level of compute, to me, more of economics finance guy, we're talking about like moving markets, right? We're talking about like energy prices. Like I think just the raw amount of computational machines that would need to be built to serve a serious blow to Bitcoin. And we're talking about the moving copper markets at that point. So I'm really not worried about it. I think this is more FUD. That being said, if anything ever happened to some of these older wallets, I think it would be pandemonium on X. I think there'd be a pretty drastic move at the price of Bitcoin. But then it's like, okay, we can't get this short-term supply shock. What were coins that were previously taken out in circulation are now in circulation. I don't think anything fundamentally breaks though.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I mean, I think it's healthy right now that the whales are selling in. It's getting into fresh hands, decentralizing a little bit more. I bite my tongue though, because it's just moving hands now to BlackRock with IBIT, and a lot of that money is moving in there. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I think too with the quantum stuff. I think it's further. I think nation states are going to be the only ones that have the power, or like maybe massive companies, but I also think they're going to go after the bigger fish too. Like Bitcoin's still small comparative to many of the other markets, right? So
yeah. So Rob had on, before we get into this market, Rob had on organizer of is it Bitcoin Lugano? No, Plan B Lugano. Ducouvre Bitcoin. I don't know. I'll get in trouble for how bad I'm butchering that. But his take was that we should not change the code. We do not want to, mess with how Bitcoin is designed now. If someone invests the time and the money and the quantum resources, which it's very expensive to go out and buy that level of like hardware, like you're talking like 100, 500 million, billion plus to go out and even attempt something like this, even if the technology exists, ton of power, is that they deserve Satoshi's coins at that point. They're saying, don't freeze the coins. And I know Michael Saylor was saying we should freeze the coins. This particular person was saying, no, we shouldn't. That is a reward. Let the market decide how much they're willing to spend to get out and go, break those initial wallets that aren't quantum resistant, and then, get those. I think if that's the case, and then the technology is feasible, it does create a market to say, oh, the Bitcoin price would rise if people are investing resources in order to get those, like potentially like a run. I don't know. I don't know if Saylor is particularly on the other side of the fence, because if you're a traditional investor, if you're an allocator at a central bank, that seems like a major thing, major risk that you don't want to leave in the hands. Like I imagine a big capital allocator would say, let's fix the code first. Let's lock those coins down. But, from a Bitcoiner's perspective, I totally get the libertarian side of it, of, let the markets decide.
Yeah.
It is fascinating conversation, because, I love Bitcoin. I don't really want to be messed with too much, but then I don't know, Jody. At first, like, just hearing you say that, I haven't heard that theory. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But then I was just thinking, after you finish speaking, it's like, well, then are we kind of incentivizing like the wrong things? Like from a pure libertarian standpoint, I think you are correct. Like that is, market incentive, but then it's like almost then encouraging, or it's like the whole hacker scammer, phenomenon that I think is repulsive behavior. It's like, well, I'm just gonna spend all my time, energy, and resources to try to, take somebody else's Bitcoin.
It's very, and like a microcosm though too. It's like Bitcoiners want institutions out of it. So a lot of Bitcoiners are like, yeah, this is pure. This is not supposed to be centralized, and it's not supposed to have governments buying this up, right? It's a free market though, right? So anyone can. So that's why I say you can paint your little fantasy world as much as you want, but the reality is people can do it, so they're going to, right? So I know freezing wallets is slightly different here, but it's a similar kind of concept. Is where you let the free market take place. So yeah, very interesting. Well, Wyatt, Jody, I don't know if you have other questions. I was going to wrap it up here and talk about what we got going tomorrow.
Yeah. So also Bitcoin 100K in January. I will admit this is a market I got washed on, or I didn't like invest a lot of money on it, but it was something I said on screen. I was like, this is something I'm bullish on. Permable, always, hyper Bitcoinization. It takes time. So I think we had KT on, who Avi will talk about in a minute, but from a trading perspective, he saw like a falling wedge with Bitcoin. Once it breaks 90, 94, he saw a breakout. He said this week too, he's like, hey guys, like Bitcoin's failing right now, not failing as an overall technology, but it's failing that breakout in a very, very short-term sense. So his thoughts, like March, when he sees more of a big move with Bitcoin, the fact that it didn't continue on to 100K. But we like to be transparent. We like to hold ourselves accountable. So that's why I'm bringing this up, saying, hey guys, like I was wrong. We didn't get the run that KT and I both hoped for outside of this. So patience, listen to people like Wyatt, invest your money in very sound ways, such as buying cold storage Bitcoin.
Yeah. And we'll ask KT about that tomorrow. On the positive side, he did call Micron, and that's gone up almost $100 now since he last called that. So one of the best options traders. I think it's, I'm curious if it's more of like the attention economy. Like ultimately people are focused on gold and silver right now. AI, that there's only finite amount of capital unless you're the Fed. So it is interesting to see where this goes. But yeah, tomorrow we're bringing KT back on. We got two other guests. So join us, give us a follow. Wyatt, I got to ask, where can people follow you, find your information, Twitter, website, whatever else you got out there?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Always a ton of fun. You can find me on Twitter at @WyattO'Rourke_. If you're interested in my personal writings and beliefs, those can be found at WyattO'Rourke.com. If you're interested in some of the professional things we're doing, Basilic.io or PaxPartnersFund.com.
Dude,
Awesome.
love it. All right. So what's the next event? So you guys had the Bitcoin Financial Services Summit in Denver. Is that coming back? Like what we got in 2026?
You bet it is. Yeah. October 21 through 23rd, Jordan and I are running back. We actually spun out, Bitcoin for Financial Services Media, and it's its own entity. We had a ton of positive reception from the first go around, and we're really just trying to bring professional services, financial professional services folks into the Bitcoin fold so they can better service their clients. So we're hyper focused on helping those. We got a community going, we got a podcast, obviously doing the summit, and I'm really excited about how that's kind of shaping up.
If we don't have it already, we'll add that to 21 rates.
Thank you, Jens.
Yeah.
In the
We're
learning
going to be on site. We're going to be calling people out, like just RIAs. Are you going to freeze Satoshi's coins?
You better be there. I expect it. I know short notice a little bit last year. No excuses this time.
Yeah.
I know. Is it skiing weather by October out there?
No, it's not.
Oh,
I mean, there can be like a run or two open, but it's like fake snow and like literally a run or two.
Wrap up.
We're having a golf tournament though. You like to swing the clubs?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Jody's the Tiger Woods of the group. I'm more of the Happy Gilmore.
Daniel Berman, our friend over at Kraken, definitely more of the golfer. So we'll have to get him out to Denver.
I love it. All are welcome.
Awesome. Well, everyone give Wyatt a follow. Make sure to tune in tomorrow. We are here every single day, hence the name, The Daily Stack. So we'll be back here tomorrow at 12:30
Weekdays,
Eastern.
though. Weekdays. We like the weekends.
We should call it the weekday stack. Well, thank you guys again, and we'll see y'all tomorrow.
Yeah. Hey, Wyatt.
Thanks, guys.